Florida killer Wade Wilson sentenced to death. What happens now? The air is thick with tension. The courtroom is silent, save for the occasional shuffling of papers and coughing. All eyes are on the judge, gavel raised, expression grave. Wade Wilson, Judge Nicholas Thompson declares solemnly, for the murders of Kristine Melton and Diane Ruiz, this court sentences you to death. This is not a moment to be swallowed lightly. It is the culmination of brutality, pain, loss, and the immense weight of justice. The dark and horrific story of Wade Wilson has left Florida in shock, anger, and the inevitable question, what happens next? In 2019, Fort Myers, Florida, was gripped by fear when two brutal murders shattered the quiet lives of its residents. Wade Wilson, then 30, was the protagonist. Kristine Melton, a vibrant 35-year-old woman, was found dead in her apartment, the victim of unimaginable violence. Days later, Diane Ruiz, 43, disappeared while walking to work. Her lifeless body was discovered in a wooded area, confirming the community's worst fears. For weeks, the quiet neighborhoods of Cape Coral became a landscape of suspicion and unease. Families locked their doors more fervently. People whispered in hushed tones, raising the inevitable question, who could do such a thing? The answer, it turned out, was chillingly close. Wade Wilson was soon arrested, and the evidence against him painted a grim picture of his ruthless crimes. The Cape Coral Police Department and investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading up to the two murders. The evidence was compelling. Wilson's DNA was present at both crime scenes, and surveillance footage captured movements that directly linked him to the victims. Witness testimony placed him near Ruiz's last known location, and phone records further cemented his involvement. Through these tireless efforts, a clear story emerged. Wilson attacked Melton in her home shortly after meeting her. Days later, he attacked Ruiz in an equally violent manner. This was not a case of random acts of violence, but of methodical, deliberate, and utterly terrifying acts. When the time came to begin the trial, all the evidence pointed unequivocally towards Wilson. The trial that followed was both a display of justice in action and a painful journey for all involved, particularly the families of the victims. The prosecution laid out its case in great detail. They recounted how Wilson, driven by evil intentions, planned and carried out the killings. Pictures of the crime scenes were shown to the jury, a chilling reminder of the brutality inflicted on Melton and Ruiz. Meanwhile, the defense attempted to present mitigating factors, arguing that mental health issues and personal difficulties might have played a role. But it wasn't enough. On June 12, the jury returned its verdict, guilty of both murders beyond a reasonable doubt. The courtroom filled with a heavy silence as Wilson stood impassively before the people he had wronged. Even after the guilty verdict, the trial was far from over. The jury had to weigh aggravating and mitigating circumstances in order to recommend a sentence. The aggravating factors were clear: the brutality of the murders, the premeditation involved, and Wilson's lack of remorse. On the other hand, the defense's attempts to portray Wilson as a victim of circumstance failed to convince anyone. The jury's recommendation was clear: Wade Wilson should be sentenced to death. Judge Nicholas Thompson agreed and imposed not one, but two death sentences, one for each life brutally taken by Wilson's actions. For the families of Kristine Melton and Diane Ruiz, the sentencing marked a turning point. While nothing could bring their loved ones back to life, they found some comfort in knowing that justice had been served. The courtroom resonated with emotional testimony from family members, who expressed grief, anger, and a small measure of relief. Wade Wilson is now one of the few inmates on death row in Florida, and this raises a larger question about the role of capital punishment in modern justice. Florida is one of the states that actively practices the death penalty, with a long and controversial history surrounding its use. While some see it as the ultimate form of justice for heinous crimes, others cannot ignore its moral, legal, and financial implications. Wilson's case has reignited these debates. Was the death penalty the only option? Would life without parole have sufficed? Or did his crimes cross a threshold of evil such that no other punishment could be adequate? These are questions that society must continue to ask itself in the face of justice. For Wade Wilson, the story is not over yet. His sentencing sets off a chain of legal proceedings that could stretch for years. In Florida, all death penalty cases trigger an automatic appeals process. This is designed to ensure that no miscarriage of justice occurs, but it also means that the families of Melton and Ruiz may endure years of additional legal proceedings before Wilson's fate is finally decided. The appeals process is often grueling. Defense attorneys can argue procedural errors during the trial or try to challenge new evidence. Given the strength of the case against him, however, it is unlikely that Wilson's sentence will be overturned. Still, this process lengthens the time until the execution can be carried out, a time that prolongs the emotional toll on all involved. Above all, it is the victims' families who must live with the consequences of these crimes every day. For them, every legal filing, every court date, and every news headline is a reminder of what they have lost. While the death penalty can bring closure to some people, the process can also reopen wounds and prolong the healing process. Kristine Melton's family described her as a bright light in their lives, someone who loved unconditionally and made the world a better place just by being in it. Diane Ruiz was a beloved mother and friend, known for her kindness and unwavering strength. Her loss is deeply felt by those who loved her, a void that can never be truly filled. The case of Wade Wilson forces us to confront difficult questions. What is justice in the face of unspeakable violence? Does the death penalty deter others from committing such heinous crimes, or is it an act of vengeance disguised as justice? These are questions that society must grapple with, particularly in cases as cruel and heartbreaking as this one. Some argue that the only way to ensure public safety is to eradicate individuals like Wilson from society. Others argue that life imprisonment is a harsher punishment, depriving criminals of their freedom and forcing them to live in cold, gray solitude. Whether or not one agrees with Wilson's sentence, his case sheds light on these broader social dilemmas. For crime enthusiasts and those who care about justice, this story serves as a grim reminder of the importance of vigilance and awareness. Wade Wilson did not act out of nowhere, he was a product of circumstance, but his decisions led to catastrophe. Could early intervention have prevented these crimes? Could greater community awareness have saved Melton and Ruiz? These are the sobering questions this case leaves behind. Understanding the factors that lead to violent crimes like these, whether through early warning signs or deeper societal issues, remains a crucial part of crime awareness work. It is a reminder for all of us to remain vigilant, protect each other, and advocate for a safer society. As the gavel sounds and the courtroom empties, Wade Wilson is escorted to a life of solitude on death row. The families of Kristine Melton and Diane Ruiz leave the courthouse, their faces heavy with the weight of what has happened. For them, the fight for justice is over, but the journey of grief and healing continues. This case is more than the story of a man sentenced to death. It is a powerful window into the complexities of justice, morality, and the darkest corners of humanity. Florida's legal system has handed down its ultimate punishment, but for the rest of us, the debates and reflections have only just begun. What happens next? The answer depends on how society decides to respond, whether it remains engaged, vigilant, and committed to preventing tragedies like this from happening again.